Welcome in on a Friday, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. So you see the map there. Let's talk about this. Sightings of drones in the sky, the size of cars, now dominating headlines in New Jersey. Now also sightings reported in New York, Pennsylvania, and in Maryland. The question of what they are now in 4 states and in the minds of multiple lawmakers and even the White House. In fact, listen to National Security spokesman John Kirby addressing the concerns.
While there is no known malicious activity occurring, the reported sightings there do, however, highlight a gap in authorities. And so we urge Congress to pass important legislation that will extend and expand existing counter-drone authorities so that we are better prepared to identify and mitigate any potential threats to airports or other critical infrastructure, and so that state and local authorities are provided all the tools that they need to respond to such threats as well.
Our CBS News national investigative correspondent Tom Hansen met with a drone unit expert. Tom, a wingspan of 8 feet, and then you just hear him use the term potential threats. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, well, Reed, that's exactly right. These are huge devices that are hovering up in the sky, and we don't still know who they are coming from, where they are coming from, what they're doing here. But what I can tell you is that obviously the size of these devices is a huge concern, because a lot of people are asking out there, why not just shoot them down? And, you know, even the sheriff that we met up with this past night, he said that given the chance, he would shoot one down too. But these are public safety concerns. Think of, you know, that Mini Cooper, that small car falling from 1,000 feet in the air. That could do some serious damage to anyone who's beneath it. And sorry, my earpiece is falling out here. But basically, you know, that is front of mind, no doubt, for all authorities here. But we still don't have the answers as to who's behind this. We do know that these are sophisticated things. Another thing the sheriff told me was that basically these drones have been able to outmaneuver the police drones, meaning they are moving faster than the police drones, which can reach a max speed of 40 miles per hour. They estimate that these drones can travel even faster, all the way up to 60 miles an hour. So they are moving quickly at laser speed through the sky.
Tom, we're also hearing of some letters fired off by key senators to the FAA, the Department of Homeland Security, even the FBI. Who sent those letters and what are they demanding?
Yeah, a coalition of 4 senators from New Jersey and New York. They've banded together to push the FAA, FBI, and DHS to get some answers. They want to hear exactly what those federal government agencies are doing with municipal governments in order to get to the bottom of this growing mystery that seems to, you know, continue to grow in complexity as well. So, you know, that really is the basis of their letter. It was to issue frustration. It was to express concern for the public and for instance, critical operations within the public, like medevac helicopters. That was specifically referenced in that letter. So there is mounting frustration. They want answers. And clearly, it just adds another group of people who don't have any answers as to what's going on.
All right, so we're going to go even deeper, Tom. Speaking of lawmakers, New York officials in Staten Island held a news conference earlier calling for answers, too. Just to add to the conversation, let's listen to this.
Just be straight with us. Tell us what it is. And let's address it the best possible way so we can calm everyone down and make sure that these don't pose a threat to our national security and public safety. Because even if it is not nefarious, the fact that these things are flying all over is a public safety issue. There can be an accident. There could be an explosion. There could be a crash. This is a very densely populated area. And going back to the FAA restrictions, you cannot be flying these things above and around buildings if it's commercial or recreational. So something's not right here, and we need our government to give us answers and also put in place restrictions so that this does not continue, and enforce the existing regulations and restrictions. And that means our government needs to follow those rules as well.
Yeah, to borrow her words, Tom, something's not right. And really, you've been covering this story from the very beginning. It's like this drumbeat gets louder and louder. Lawmakers frustrated, the public frustrated. They want answers, any timeline as to when some of these letters fired off or some of these calls at news conferences could get answered with some answers?
Well, we know that the FBI is working in tandem with the municipal governments, but beyond that, we are getting so many conflicting theories as to where these drones are coming from. It's abundantly clear that no one really has an answer right now. You heard John Kirby saying that it's not a threat to national security, yet you have representatives on Capitol Hill saying that it is a foreign adversary. You have, just a lot of different theories out there, but not a lot of evidence. And all of these things have been followed up with a request for concrete factual evidence. And it just seems more and more to that drumbeat analogy that you said that we may finally get answers once one of these drones crashes into the ground or lands and is secured by law enforcement, but we are still waiting for that to happen. Once there can be forensics run on these drones, which are, as I mentioned, so highly sophisticated and can move so quickly, this is not a hobbyist using these drones. That is abundantly clear to law enforcement. Once we can run forensics on these drones, then the answers will become clearer as to who, where, and why they are here.
First, New Jersey, now 4 states in total. Tom Hansen, thank you so much for investigating.
These mysterious drones have been hovering above us for weeks now, baffling residents as well as local lawmakers. The most recent sighting was reported right above us in the South Bronx, as well as St. Albans, Queens on Thursday, where residents sent us videos. Local lawmakers are now pressing for a full federal briefing on the situation. On Thursday, Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Chuck Schumer of New York and Cory Booker and Andy Kim of New Jersey sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the FAA, calling the sightings alarming and a potential safety risk. The White House is trying to calm the public down, saying many of the more than 3,000 reported sightings so far may have been planes mistaken for drones. Local politicians have been expressing frustration with what they believe to be inaction from the federal government. At 10 a.m. this morning, the Staten Island borough president called on the NYPD to investigate sightings over local military bases, key points of interest, and residential neighborhoods. The NYPD says it is investigating the drone activity along with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Reporting from the South Bronx, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
New York City lawmakers are calling on the NYPD and the federal government to solve the growing drone mystery spreading across the Northeast. More than 3,000 sightings reported thus far. Just a few moments ago, New York Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis addressed the situation. CBS News New York is covering it. Let's watch.
The world's on Staten Island. And now we feel like we're characters in that movie. What is happening is outrageous. Thousands of drones and unmanned aerial systems flying above us, and our government is not telling us who's operating them and for what purpose. I don't believe that the United States of America, with its military capabilities, does not know what these objects are. And what I'm asking, and what we're all asking, is for you to be straight with us and just tell us what is going on. As Vito says, this is creating havoc. People are confused, they're concerned, they have anxiety, they don't know what's going on. There's all sorts of theories that are out there. And the best way to address this is to just be honest and tell the American people what is going on. These are not recreational drones. These are not, I don't believe, commercial drones, because if they are violating existing rules and regulations, which say that they need to be under 400 feet and they can't be operating in the middle of the night between sunset and sunrise. So that leaves 2 options. It's our government, or there's a foreign nexus. And so either our government is doing some type of surveillance activity or survey.
All right, let's bring in Pramod Abichandani, Associate Professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So the idea that some of these could be ordinary aircraft, the wingspan was described by some as 8 feet. I heard somebody else describe it as big as a mini, a Cooper Mini. I mean, that's pretty big for a drone, but it's probably still too small for an airplane, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you think about the kind of drones you get at a Walmart or an Amazon store, those are tiny drones. But then as you go more towards the enterprise level drone, the more sort of bigger drones, they start getting into like the 3 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet wide spans. Now, one thing to keep in mind is just because a drone size is big doesn't necessarily always make it threatening. Like this picture that you're showing, that is a pretty big drone. And there are drones that are used in agricultural applications, as well as just drones that are made by different companies that are quite big, and they kind of range in that 6 to 8 feet wingspan, or just the length of the arms. So it is true that these are not the recreational drone types, but it is also true that they're not like massive the bigger drones that you see with long range endurance that usually the military uses.
So, Professor, you used the word drones. You've used it several times in our discussion. You believe that they are drones, right?
Well, some of the eyewitness videos that I have watched, some of the conversations we've had with other experts and colleagues, some of them are not drones. Some of them are just straight up your helicopters and manned aircrafts. It's just air traffic. On the other hand, there are drones that look like, the kind of drones that you would purchase off a vendor's website. Those are big drones, but they still display the characteristic of a commercially available drone. And then there are some videos, like a very small number of videos where it's blurry enough, it's not clear enough that you can. It's hard to ascertain whether these are really like small aircrafts that are being piloted by somebody in them, or are these like slightly bigger type drones that are being remotely piloted.
Wow. All right. Whose responsibility would you say it is to track these things down? The Monmouth County Sheriff in New Jersey says that they're flying their own equipment in the area in hopes of getting some answers. Should this be a federal response?
Yeah, so with drones, it takes a village, and I think it's personally, I know that it's very hard to not only detect a drone but also track it and then ultimately interdict it, like capture it. A lot of my research that has been funded by the U.S. Department of Defense focuses on these counter UAS systems. There's no simple answer to this. The only thing that is clear is it requires the whole apparatus to come together, to coordinate, to have great communication between the teams on the ground and the radar centers, just to make sure that that not a single piece of evidence is lost.
Fascinating. All right, Professor Pramod Abichandani, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, they look small, but they are very big. Moments ago, New York Governor Kathy Hochul weighed in on the New York drone sightings, saying on social media this time there is no evidence that these drones pose a public safety or national security threat, close quote. So I want to talk live to Jonathan Ruprecht. Jonathan, welcome into CBS News 24/7. You're fascinating to talk to because you're a drone attorney, you're an FAA certified commercial pilot, and you're a flight instructor. So I'm fascinated to see your read on all of this reporting, especially what we just heard from Hochul.
Yes, I think what strikes me is, kind of how when people are trying to get to the bottom of what is going on here, that seems to be the big issue, is they're trying to figure out what is going on, right? Are these bad guy drones? Are these good guy drones? We don't know. And we're kind of at the preliminary issue here of being able to figure out how to discriminate good guy drone, bad guy drone. And there seems to be a breakdown going on there from federal, state, and local law enforcement as to what is going on here. So when people are kind of asking the broader question, whose responsibility is it to track these things down? You have DHS is dealing with terrorism. You have DOJ and FBI dealing with criminal laws. We have the FAA dealing with protecting the airspace. They're dealing with safety. When you get higher up, they're trying to keep aircraft away from the drones and stuff like that. But we're dealing with, at the lower portions here, the interaction of really these drones with the public and people on the ground. The FAA has created Part 89, the remote identification regulations, to allow state, local law enforcement, as well as the public, to be able to receive certain types of signals. And if those signals are being broadcasted, then you can be able to tell where this drone is, and actually how high it is, because it's actually very hard to determine how high these drones are, even during the day. There's actually studies out there that explain that it is very difficult. And then now you're doing it at night. It's like, that's extremely hard.
Right.
And so you have remote identification that also can potentially allow you to identify where the ground controller location is, and then maybe go over and stop them people. So is law enforcement even receiving these signals? And that needs to be clearly disclosed to everybody. Like, we don't have anything. Well, that's an interesting point, because if you don't actually receive anything and you are actually receiving everything else, you validated the equipment, then potentially you might have a careless clues, maybe a criminal type of actor here. But we haven't even got to that point. We're at the very preliminary stage of like, are these guys breaking the law? Because it's not illegal to fly a drone in the United States, especially at night. Recreational as well as non-recreational flyers can fly drones lawfully all the time without requesting permission from the federal government. And some of these people are actually having anti-collision lights on their drones, which appears to kind of make it look like they're actually trying to follow the law. So specifically 14 CFR 107.29 says you have to have an anti-collision light. So what's going on there? Now, There might be some indications as to maybe these might be bad guy drones if they're flying in an area that maybe they shouldn't be. For example, prisons. Do they really need to be flying over the prisons? What about military installations? Do you really have a legitimate interest, reason to fly over a military installation? Probably not. But one thing that they might be able to fly near that kind of causes a lot of confusion is airports. For example, the FAA has implemented this Lance system, is what it's called, and it allows for rapid authorizations. And in the news, there's been a lot of talks about drones flying near airports, and that's dangerous and scary and stuff like that. But over the last so many years, the FAA has granted over 1 million authorizations for drones to fly lawfully near airports. So that's 1 million reasons why there could be a lawful drone flight happening.
So tell me this, with somebody with your expertise, when you just look at this and you've seen a lot of the footage, what do you think these things are? Our investigation shows 8 feet wingspan. Just to your eye, what are they and what's their capability? Best case scenario, it's just somebody flying around. Worst case scenario?
It's nothing. There's nothing illegal about having an 8-foot drone flying around, right? And so it could just be a guy with an 8-foot drone flying around at night. He's testing it out. Worst case scenario, it could be an individual that is trying to do reconnaissance, right? You could have either some type of private industrial espionage. You could also have nation state actor espionage, something maybe along those lines. So if you don't see anything underneath it, that might indicate that it might have to be terrorism, or maybe it's a precursor to terrorism. But that's in a worst case scenario. At the same time, we have many, many, many lawful people flying lawfully all the time, helping people and save lives.
So, you have different layers to this. You have federal, you have local, you have state law enforcement. Do you think that this case now, and we're seeing it now in 4 states, is going to help us hone the coordination between those different layers of government, perhaps in responding to something like this in the future?
I believe so. I mean, this is a good wake-up call for everyone to figure out, like, hey, are we actually receiving these remote identification signals? And as the local law enforcement on the ground, are these officers trained on how to do that? Potentially, and so that way you can kind of escalate it up from there, saying, hey, guys, there's a drone that is not broadcasting. Potentially, that makes it suspicious at that point because it's not following the law. Therefore, we need to kind of escalate and further investigate. And so it's really kind of honing everybody here. Additionally, even if you have identified that is a potential suspicious drone that you need to get into, that creates a lot of issues. Because how do you go further about tracking and kind of finding out where this the controller is? Where's the bad guy, if you will? If there isn't a bad guy, it might be a clueless guy that just needs educating, going like, hey, by the way, give me your license registration. I need to see figuring out what's going on here. There needs to be some effort on state, local, and federal, as well as coordinating efforts as to allow the local law enforcement, the boots on the ground, to be able to do more advanced types of detection. Now, there's an interesting point here because people are kind of bringing up this issue. How do you deal with the bad guy drones? The first part is, right, we got the detect, and you kind of have to discriminate, if you will, good guy drone, bad guy drone, suspicious drone, right? And then if you want to go about resolving the problem, you need to defeat it. And the problem there is when you get into the detection and you get into the defeating, there are a lot of laws that have been created which hamper federal, state, and local law enforcement and how they potentially go about doing that. For example, you have the Fourth Amendment protections, which were intentionally designed from basically, it's designed to hamper the federal government from doing complete mass surveillance of people inside their homes, right? Is you have the Caro case, and as well as the Carpenter case, when you have people out and about and you're tracking their cell phones and stuff like that. You have that case law playing this whole situation there. You also have Fourth Amendment, reasonable expectation of privacy in people's homes. You have Wiretap Act. So if you're trying to intercept these signals that maybe are encrypted, or there's a modulation that is not readily available. So even in the detection, there are problems from a constitutional and a statutory federal law standpoint that are hampering federal and state and local law enforcement from even kind of further investigating, double clicking, if you will, into these issues. And then even if you get past that, how do you go about interdicting and stopping these drones? If, let's say, they are bad, there is an issue there because currently granted from federal statutes are that only certain federal agencies have the ability to do these types of interdiction, destruction type of countering, the defeats, if you will.
To knock them out of the sky.
Yeah, exactly. The shoot them out of the sky analogy, right? So you got DOD and you have DOJ, you have certain ones there, but that is not given to the state and local. And so sometimes people are bringing this up and they're saying, well, we have drones. How do we actually resolve it? And that's creating a tension there because state and local is wanting to come in and they're wanting to create something. And at the same time, there is an issue there of how do we make this all work while at the same time promoting commerce and allowing these drones to fly? Because you can see where this can go from here is that a creative state might want to say, we want to create a law that you have to put our specific state remote identification law, a device on it. And it's going to cost, $1,000 a year or something, because we're going to bring everybody to, know what's going on, safety, all that. Well, that's going to cause a lot of problems because people are not going to actually be able to fly there. There might be congestion of the airspace elsewhere because people will be flying drones elsewhere and not here. And so that creates a really big hindrance to the federal government basically integrating drones across the United States. So when people kind of create a law, what happens is when there's a cause, there's an effect, right? The effect is sometimes drones go fly somewhere else, and that causes an over-concentration, potentially creating more risk here. And so we have in the Constitution, we have this basically that what it is that the federal law is the supreme law of the land. And the idea is you just don't want the federal government having to kind of constantly deal with all of these state and local laws and trying to implement everything, and that it's going to supersede. And if there is a field preemption kind of argument or there's a conflict preemption, then the federal law is going to take control. And in aviation, there's Supreme Court case law that has held that it is a field preempted area, that it's so heavily regulated that it's kind of implied that, hey, there's nothing really here for you state and local guys to really do. Additionally, there's another argument that the creation, basically the compliance with this particular type of law is so impossible that it is substantially frustrated or prevents the person from doing it. It's a conflict. And we have an example of that over in, it was the city of Newton over in Massachusetts. There was a case over there where the city said, you cannot fly below 400 feet. Well, at the same time, the federal government is saying, you have to fly your drone, right, under 400 feet. So that's the big issue.
Well, a lot of people getting their voices heard, getting scholarly about it. Meanwhile, the people on the ground in 4 states saying, what the hell is it? Jonathan, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation.